Live.
Oh, we are live now.
Word up.
Word up.
Hey there. Welcome to the Deeper Dive presented by Yahoo.com. Dave Lochran, Adam Scherer, and we have got ourselves a 14 gamer today. No 6 p.m. nonsense, just straight 7 p.m. and later. A ton of games on the docket. Adam, glad to have you here with me and glad to have everyone watching. We got a whole lot to talk about. We're getting an early start today to make sure we can jam all of it in. But before we get to anything, before we break down these games, before we talk pitchers, I think we have to talk about the fact that there should be 14 games, but there won't be 14 games. Two of them already postponed, Orioles and Twins, Cleveland and Atlanta, which sucks because I liked Kluber at that price point. I actually don't believe anything's wrong with him. And Tuki Toussaint, man, that dude's curveball. I was watching a lot of him the past week or so. He's got like a 75-mile-per-hour curveball that he can drop in for strikes, or he can just bury it in the dirt. And now he has a wicked splitter. I was actually looking forward to getting a cheap Toussaint. That won't be the case. And then you have, again, no Orioles Twins. But there are other games right now that aren't exactly in the clear either, Adam, in the Northeast and slight around the Cleveland area as well. There are some games that we still need to pay close attention to.
Yeah, no question. I'm assuming that the Giants and Pirates game doesn't go. That's not official yet though. And then the other two games were kind of dealing with potential in-game delays, and things could get messy. So yeah, it's nice that we at least got early news on the Baltimore game and the Cleveland game.
So just some other ones to keep your eye on. It looks like Pittsburgh, San Francisco could be an issue. Slightly problematic here at PNC Park. And then another one would be the Yankees game against Kansas City. Fortunately, we have plenty of games to talk about, so it's not as big of an issue. But I honestly, Adam, I don't know if these are going to be in-game delays or they might get postponed as well. Like if you look at, and I'm no meteorologist, but if you were to look at the radar on just in the Northeast alone, it does not look pretty. What are you doing before we get into the actual games themselves? Just pull up a radar loop of like the Northeast right now, all the way out towards Chicago, really, all the way out towards the Midwest. You got just massive strings of thunderstorms and a lot of dark green. So my guess is that Pittsburgh, there might be an opening, but if you were to pull it up, Pittsburgh does not look good at all either.
Yeah, that seems like the riskiest to me in terms of postponement. The other two, I think it's, do we get a delay in the middle of the game that screws our pitchers?
Right. Yeah, all right. Well, just keep a close watch on it.
So for right now, just for what I'm doing, and obviously, you can approach it differently, but for right now, in my initial crunches, I just have that Pittsburgh game X'd out because I don't think it plays. I assume we'll know in the next couple of hours, but for right now, I'm just pretending it doesn't exist.
It honestly seems just as bad as Cleveland.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. Again, not a meteorologist, but I do have eyes. So, all right, Adam, let's do it, man. Yankees, Kansas City. We'll start with that. You've got on the mound for the Yankees, CC Sabathia. He was phenomenal in his debut. I mean, he went 5 scoreless with only 3 Ks, but he gave up 1 hit and only threw 62 pitches in that game. So they yanked him after 5, but he could have kept going for quite some time. And then Jake Junis, who is a homer-prone righty, but also is not terrible. He has not been very good this year, though, and he is prone to giving up a lot of runs, oftentimes by way of the long ball. And lefty-friendly park probably won't do him any favors, although he's given up a lot of righties or homers to righties as well. What do you make of pitching here between Sabathia and Junis at Yankee Stadium, which, by the way, weather could be an issue here as well?
Yeah, this is one definitely keeping an eye on weather because I think there's a chance that we could get an in-game delay here. I'm not really interested in Sabathia. I think that he's the better real life pitcher than DFS pitcher at this point. I have concerns about how deep he'll go into the game. You mentioned him throwing 62 pitches last start. There's no reason for the Yankees to really push him. They also have a really good bullpen, so they tend to have a shorter leash with most of their starters anyway. I don't see a lot in the Kansas City lineup that scares me from a hitting standpoint. Merrifield and Mondesi are good, and beyond that, it really drops off. They do have their base stealing lineup out there, and Sabathia struggled to hold runners a bit last year. Higashioka struggled to throw them out. So guys that get on base could take advantage, but overall, I'm not scared of the spot for Sabathia. It's more just that I think there are higher upside guys on the slate, and Jake Junis is one of them. I'm not getting a ton of Junis because as I make lineups, it just seems pretty unnecessary. On FanDuel, the one pitcher site, obviously, just don't even worry about it. But talking Yahoo and DraftKings, where you need the two pitchers, I do think he has upside against a lineup with 6 right-handed hitters and that has virtually no power from the left side. If he's someone, his fastball is terrible. His fastball gets blasted. But if he's able to locate it and get ahead in counts, he has a nasty slider that he can finish guys off with. And so it wouldn't be shocking to see a bunch of strikeouts from him. But there's also a ton of power upside here for the Yankees. So this is one of the few spots on the slate where I'm actually playing both sides of it. Right now in my initial crunch, the Yankees were my 3rd highest 5-man stack, and Junis was coming in as like my 7th highest owned pitcher on DraftKings.
All right. Sounds good. And yeah, Sabathia is only going to throw 75, 80 pitches, but depending on how appreciate that, Dante. Depending on how efficient he is, it might not matter. Also, I do want to throw something out there when you're dealing with weather. This isn't something to always consider, but if you have a game like Pittsburgh, San Francisco, where the Giants are on the East Coast and East Coast road trip, whatever it is, and it's not exactly like they're going to be traveling back to Pittsburgh much, those games they might be more inclined to try and get them in. Whereas if it's a divisional game and you're going to see the team 100 more times this season, or it's a team right around the same area, they might be more inclined to postpone those because they can get it in easier.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The flip side to that is that with tomorrow being Saturday, or with it being the beginning of a weekend series, they have all the time in the world to play a doubleheader.
Doubleheader it. Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it really all depends on what they want to do. But I know things have, didn't they crack down on the Nationals? Remember when they were basically postponing any game when they had a bad pitcher scheduled to start?
I'm not sure if they cracked down on it, but that was definitely something that was happening.
Somebody mentioned something. It might have been Alex Baker. It might have been Awesemo that said something about them, making it so they couldn't make the decision anymore, and it had to have been made by like the league or something.
Okay. I mean, I don't know why that wasn't the case before, but I hope it is now. I don't know if it is.
Yeah. Well, you remember though,
Yeah.
the way, I mean, I remember it was Joe Ross I guess supposed to go, and they're like, nope, postpone. Never even rained.
No, I mean, I live in the area, and I look at it like I live 20 minutes from the stadium, probably, or 30 minutes. And I'm like looking outside, and it's like sunny, maybe drizzled a little bit, and there's like, nope, can't play.
Yeah, a slight breeze.
Right.
It's ridiculous. With Yankee bats, though, and there's really no question that this could be a spot where they erupt. I like guys like Luke Voit quite a bit, batting 3rd in the lineup. Junis has struggled with right-handed power, and this is something where when he's not hitting his spots, he can just give up a lot of shots, and it'll come to lefties and righties alike. But you look at last season. He allowed 1.87 home runs per 9 to righties. He also strikes them out at a 25% clip. He had a 3.8 xFIP. Like, his numbers were not that bad. He didn't walk them either. It's just he's the type of guy that when he misses his spots, things get really ugly. So I don't mind Luke Voit, like I mentioned. I don't mind the middle of this order. Of course, Aaron Judge and Gleyber Torres, I think, is a pretty solid play as well. Those guys all to me make some sense. Individually, who do you like on this Yankees team?
Yeah, those 3 are the priority for me. In particular, Aaron Judge and Gleyber Torres, because obviously you can roster multiple outfielders. Torres multi-position eligibility on DraftKings is really helpful, whereas Voit is just stuck at first base, and there's a lot of options there. But those 3 right-handed power bats in the middle of the order are the most appealing part for me. Clint Frazier is another guy with some power in the outfield. that I think is interesting. But yeah, I mean, Junis, he's Dylan Bundy-esque. Like, he has this really good slider that if he's throwing it good, nobody's going to touch it. But his fastball's trash, and he's going to make, unless he just has pinpoint command the entire game, he's going to give up a few balls that either are fouled straight back or that are hit 450 feet.
Right, exactly. Any interest in KC bats here?
More so on FanDuel. They're priced up enough on the other sites where I don't really want to get there, but they're favorably priced on FanDuel in what I think is a reasonably good running spot, and more importantly, as you like to point out, a spot where I think it's very clear that they intend on running based on their lineup. So I do think that there is some upside where you can get them at more favorable price tags. But Merrifield at 4,800, Mondesi at 4,900 on DraftKings is relative to other guys on the slate. It's kind of tough.
You're right, though. When you see Merrifield, Hamilton, Mondesi, they're all, two of the three are always in the lineup. And then Terrence Gore, there has to be some intent on running and thinking that you can run. Interesting. And there's speed here. So I'm with you on that one. Let's move on. Pittsburgh, San Francisco. Yeah, I'm not on this game either, only because of the weather. But I think we'll just talk. We have to talk about it because it's not postponed yet. I wrote the deep dive today on awesomeo.com. You can check that out. Use the promo code Deeper Dive, by the way, all one word, if you want to get 50% off your first month of subscription and check out all the great stuff we have on top of the articles, the ownership projections, player projections, lineup builder, fantasy cruncher add-on, and of course, Alex Baker, Awesomeo himself, all of his content, his rankings and projections. We have so much there. So use the promo code Deeper Dive. One word if you want to get 50% off your first month, or check out a weekly subscription. You can sign up for a week, see if you like it, and then go ahead and take the dive. It's Deeper Dive, one word. But Jordan Lyles has struck out 12 batters in his first two starts, Adam. So I go on StatCast, I'm just filtering. I'm like, I guarantee this guy's got like 9 looking strikeouts and just got super lucky. No, 10 of the 12 strikeouts have been swinging strikeouts. And that to me says something, because you sometimes guys get lucky. You don't actually look how they got the strikeouts and you're like, oh man, this looks great. But no, actually Jordan Lyles was getting, or at least did, 10 of 12 strikeouts were swinging strikeouts. And I just thought that was interesting. His swinging strike rate is almost 12%. And his curveball and changeups are both getting a lot of whiffs. So I know it's only 2 starts, but I don't know. Lyles actually looked good in those, and I don't think it was luck.
Yeah, no, I'd actually messaged Josh before the show and told him that I had spent 15 minutes digging into Jordan Lyles and deciding that I really, really liked him today, and then remembered that there's major weather concerns here and it probably won't matter. But, obviously it's a nice matchup against San Francisco, and the strikeouts over those first 2 starts are skewed because they all came in one of them. In the first start, he struck out 10% of hitters. Then the next one, I think, was 40 plus. But in that first start, he still had a double-digit swinging strike percentage. He's still throwing his curveball a lot. And if you go back to last season, that was a pitch that was getting swinging strikes then too. So it's not like, he just had a couple matchups where suddenly he's getting swinging strikes on this pitch that normally doesn't. I think he actually might have more strikeout upside going forward than he's shown in the past. And in the past, he's always at least been someone that limits damage. So I think it's a pretty exciting spot to watch. And I would be very interested in going to him here against San Francisco if somehow the weather just clears up or something.
I'm with you. I don't think it will, but it's something to keep in mind for Lyles going forward, at least.
Right.
Yeah. I was really surprised by that. Having, the baseball savant being able to look at StatCast, it's super helpful. If you it might take you a little while to really understand how to navigate it, but once you do, you can figure out whatever the hell you want. I mean, it's just unlimited. It's like NBA.com stats when you figure out play type data and all that stuff. There's no limitation to, if you want to figure something out, you can figure it out.
Yeah, and then it's just a matter of doing it. I almost just didn't even look because it was I know who Jordan Lyles is.
I know.
I'm just gonna say the same thing I always say. He's a good pitcher and he doesn't strike guys out. I was like, yeah, whatever. I have a few extra minutes. I'll look. And it's oh wow, this is good.
I know. It's wild, man. But I think the stuff, like I said, is it real? Is this real? I don't know. But if it is, I would expect really solid numbers at a great park against San Francisco team that against righties this year is striking out at a high clip, by the way, 24.2%. 10th most strikeouts in the league against righties. Dead last in weighted on base average, 29th in WRC plus. I mean, this is a bad offense.
Also, a higher swinging strike percentage for Lyles against lefties, both since the start of last season and so far this season.
Yep. Yeah. And, thanks to a curveball and a changeup, two pitches that you can implement nicely or use nicely against opposite-handed hitters. Bumgarner, I'm not really on. If anything, I was actually going to maybe take some cheaper righty bats for Pittsburgh, just punting with like a Cervelli who's $2,800 on DraftKings. I thought it was too cheap at a bad position, but I don't know. I don't really see the need to go there right now. What are you doing here with hitters or Bumgarner?
Yeah, same boat for me. I don't like anything I don't like anything enough to like risk the weather right now unless we get a huge upgrade. I agree that Cervelli is too cheap. Bumgarner is just like an average pitcher. I'm not paying Bumgarner's price on like DraftKings or Yahoo. But I don't really need to get anywhere unless the weather improves.
All right. It sounds good. Lyles, $35 on Yahoo. I guess there's no point of spending a whole lot of time on it. I kind of just hoping that I can wish it into fruition, but probably not the case.
The nice part is we already have like an abundance of guys in that price range today, and now we'll get him on a different slate.
Right, and an abundance of guys actually that are going overlooked. But like I said, I liked Toussaint as well, and he's already postponed. That was another guy I was going to have a decent amount of interest in. Let's talk about Tampa Bay and Boston, Adam. You have Stanek getting the ball in this one. I'm assuming he, I don't know, throws another inning. And then Eduardo Rodriguez, coming off his best start of the season, looked really good against Baltimore. I don't have as much faith in him against Tampa Bay, but when you look at this Tampa lineup, you've got Yandy Diaz leading off, Tommy Pham, Austin Meadows, Avisail Garcia, Daniel Robertson, Guillermo Heredia, Brandon Lowe, Willie Adames, and Michael Perez. What do you make of Rodriguez in this matchup that he's got against a new look Tampa Bay offense or lineup? And I say that because it feels like they face a bad righty every night. I haven't seen him against the lefty, and it feels like a little while.
Yeah, he's my highest owned pitcher on DraftKings right now.
Okay.
I just really like the price tag. I don't love the matchup against Tampa. Like, I do respect their hitters, but it is a positive park shift for Rodriguez. There are strikeouts in the lineup. And even though I don't even want to say he's reverse splits, but he struggled with left-handed power. Most of the power in the Tampa lineup comes from the left side. And even though Rodriguez can struggle with it, it's still a disadvantage for those guys that don't face lefties very often, and more likely than not are going to struggle. So you get Austin Meadows on the wrong side of the platoon split. You get Brandon Lowe on the wrong side of it. You don't even have Kiermaier or Choi in the lineup. Zanino is not in the lineup. You replace him with Michael Perez. That's a benefit for Rodriguez. Willie Adames isn't a good hitter. He strikes out a ton. Daniel Robertson's nothing special. Heredia is nothing special. Outside of the top four guys in this lineup, I'm really not concerned. And the park's really nice, so I'll take my chances at a pretty nice price tag on Erod.
Okay, sounds fair enough. I will say I have a lot more respect for this Tampa Bay lineup than I did in years past, and I think Kevin Cash is pretty smart, like in terms of lineup construction and just the way that he's been able to manufacture wins with this team has been very impressive. But again, I don't think this is as concerning a lineup for the lefty Rodriguez. And I would say lefties will likely have better success against the Rays than righties this year. I would think so.
Yeah, that would be my guess. I mean, the thing is, it's a small sample size too on basically everyone because they're all young. But like Austin Meadows has 81 plate appearances against lefties. He's been absolutely phenomenal. And so, if you wanted like a completely unowned guy in an actually not bad spot, you could go there. But again, it's only 81 plate appearances. Brandon Lowe has 49. He's struck out 43% of the time so far. It's just we don't really know what to make of these guys against the lefty in a lot of cases, but I would expect them to be worse against the lefty.
And as a team, they have the fourth highest K rate against lefties this season, but they've only had 171 plate appearances. They're also walking at the highest rate in the league against lefties, and I do expect that to some extent to continue. I think you will get a lot of walks from this team against lefties. I don't know where you're at on that. I do think it could be an issue with Erod because there are times where he just loses his command and works really laborious innings. If he doesn't run into that trouble, I think he'll be fine tonight. And you don't have to worry about weather in this game. What about hitters here?
I like Boston in tournaments. Obviously not the best matchup. Ryan Stanek is virtually unhittable to open the game. And then earlier I saw something about Wilmer Font, so I'm not sure if it's him or Yarbrough coming in. But either
Looks
way,
like DraftKings doesn't know either. They don't have their PO and PLR.
that's where I had seen Wilmer Font earlier.
Oh, really? Let me see. I'll tell you if he's on there and I got it wrong. No, see maybe they once the lineup comes out, do they get rid of the PLR? I think they do.
That might be what it is.
I think they do, yeah.
But either way, neither of them are a great matchup, but neither of them are, unhittable. But the thing that I like here is that not that ownership is a huge issue on a slate this big and with so many different ways to go to, but Boston's prices are just, pretty appealing. $4,900 for bets on DraftKings is really cheap. JD Martinez at 5,100 is nice. 4,100 for Bogarts is an appealing price tag. They're just too good for those prices. I don't think I'll need a lot of Boston to be over the field on one of the most talented offenses in baseball. And so that's just something that I think is a good tournament strategy in a sport that has as much variance as baseball does. People are going to just go with, the highest projected offenses. And whenever you have an opportunity to get a team with that much talent, that much power, that much speed at low ownership, even if they do only have a 4 implied run total today, I think that the upside's well worth it.
All right, sounds good. Let's move on then. Talk Detroit and the White Sox. I think some of these players in this game are way too cheap. Now, I will point out, Adam, that number one, there is some concern for weather here. I don't think this is a game that is going to be severely affected by weather, but in terms of precipitation. But I will say, from a temperature standpoint, it's going to be cold. It's going to be in the low 40s. And I definitely think that affects, both pitchers and hitters. But there are a couple of things that stand out. Number one, I think Carlos Rodon's a very good pitcher. I like him. I think at times he'll struggle with walks and just lose it. But a guy like Harrison that has some speed, leading off, dirt cheap everywhere, who could easily get on base by way of walking or even a single and then stealing. I think he is just dirt cheap and needs to be considered. And I feel like there are a couple of those bats in this game. Jose Abreu is very inexpensive. So while I don't love the temperature, the prices do have me at least keeping an eye out for some of these bats. What are you doing here, pitching and hitting? We can tie it all into one.
So I'll start with Rodon because he's one of my highest owned pitchers right now as well. So in my initial crunch, I had 4 pitchers between 30 and 40% on DraftKings, and Rodon was one of them. So is Rodriguez. He's throwing his slider an absolutely insane amount of the time this year, and that's something that's really good to see because he gets swings and misses on it against hitters from either side of the plate. It's just a matter of in the past he would throw his 2-seamer, and now he's basically replaced all of his 2-seam fastball usage with more sliders. So far against righties this year, he has thrown 142 sliders. He has a 22.5% swinging strike percentage. Last season, he threw 344, had a 16.6% swinging strike percentage. He's striking out a ton of guys, and I don't think it's an accident. And I agree with you that some hitters in the Detroit lineup are too cheap. I am using Detroit as one of my just cheap stacks where I'm paying up for pitching or one-offs or whatever because Harrison is in a good stolen base spot. He's cheap. Castellanos is way too good of a hitter to be as cheap as he is. Miggy Cabrera is cheap. There's just cheap hitters in this lineup that have some power. So I'm not opposed to stacking there either, but I do think it's a spot where Rodon has a lot of upside at his price tag. So he's one of my higher owned pitchers. And then on the other side, Jordan Zimmerman, there's certainly strikeouts in the White Sox lineup, especially once you get to James McCann. Like, he's bad. Ryan Cordell's not good. Adam Engel's terrible. The bottom of this order is really bad, but the middle of the order is inexpensive for the most part and has a ton of power from Moncada, Abreu, Alonso, and Jimenez as, a mini stack or just, a cheap stack that you can get to as well. So I'm using both of these teams as the cheaper stacks in my grouping of teams that I'm stacking.
Right, and that's how I see it as well. I've always been a big fan of Carlos Rodon. I think his stuff is for real, um, and I still don't believe that anyone has bought into him or believes in him. Not anyone, but most people. Like he's generally speaking, this is not somebody that is going to garner a whole lot of ownership. And it seems to be the way. It seems to be the case almost every night. Now you have a much bigger slate. Just looking at projected ownership tonight, Rodon is around 10% on DraftKings. That's come up since I last looked. On FanDuel, obviously a one pitcher site, you've got Rodon at 4% at 8,800, and then on Yahoo, Carlos Rodon right now at 2% projected ownership. He's also $44. I get it. Like that's why I'm saying where Adam might say he really likes a pitcher on DraftKings, it doesn't mean that he immediately becomes a good play on Yahoo. I think given the cheap pricing on a number of viable pitchers on Yahoo tonight, it'd be much more difficult for me to get to Carlos Rodon. He's the second highest priced pitcher on Yahoo tonight.
Yeah, and Josh and I pointed that out this morning. Like you have on DraftKings, you have Rodon at 83, Caleb Smith at 82, Anibal Sanchez at like 81 or 8K. On Yahoo, 44 for Rodon, 35 for Caleb Smith, 38 for Erod, 34 for Jake Junis. Sanchez at 43 is up there too. But there's a bigger pricing discrepancy between that group of guys where I would just easily prefer saving the money and getting to the Caleb Smith, Eduardo Rodriguez even more.
Right, exactly. I am with you on that, but it's important to keep that in mind. Okay, Adam, let's keep talking here. What are your thoughts though on? I mentioned a guy like Josh Harrison, who coming off the DL right now on FanDuel. Harrison is $2,400. I think he's like $3,100 on DraftKings, and on FanDuel, Harrison's coming in at $7. So a few of these guys are really, really inexpensive. Jose Abreu being another guy that specifically on DraftKings and FanDuel is very cheap.
Right, and I think that Harrison has stolen base upside here against Rodon. Abreu and Alonso both have power for cheap, so I like them. Harrison in my initial crunch on DraftKings came in as like my fifth highest owned set. Well, I guess like third highest owned, basically the same as Robinson Cano and Ryan McMahon, behind Altuve and Torres. So I'll have a decent amount of him just because of the price tag and the fact that if he gets the first, he should be able to steal.
Right. That's really all it comes. Price point and really cheap. And as much as I like Rodon, he's no stranger to walking batters.
Right.
That is something that he has struggled with throughout the entirety of his career. Let's move on and talk Washington, Miami. Caleb Smith, Anibal Sanchez. Anibal Sanchez does have a very good matchup, but I mean, I don't know how many strikeouts you should be expecting here, even though Miami is striking out a lot. He is a contact righty. He's coming in at 14% projected ownership on Yahoo and on FanDuel. Yes, single pitcher site, 6,800. Anibal Sanchez at 14%, 19% on DraftKings. Your third highest projected owned pitcher, tied with Caleb Smith at 19%. They're behind only Eduardo Rodriguez and Justin Verlander. So both pitchers in this matchup getting a lot of love here, Adam. And my guess on Yahoo specifically, Caleb Smith will be very, very popular with a price tag. You have to scroll all the way, pretty far down. I think he's like $35 or $31. He's $35. Yeah, same price as Ulyss Chassin. Well, $100 or $1 cheaper. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean Smith's price tag on Yahoo is just a phenomenal play, but I like him on DraftKings as well. Sanchez and Smith were the other two pitchers that I have between 30 and 40% right now, along with Rodriguez and Carlos Rodon. I just like Smith has really, really good stuff. The matchup is scary. No question about that. The ballpark's good. His stuff is really good. He has multiple pitches that he has really high swinging strike percentages on going back to last year, against right-handed hitters. So I'm taking my chances on him. And then the Marlins lineup is just so bad. The park is really good. And Sanchez isn't a strikeout pitcher, like you said, but he does at least have a pitch that can get swinging strikes. And that's a big deal for me as far as, when I have someone in a matchup like this where I think that they're going to pitch well. It's just a matter of can they get strikeouts here. He does have a splitter that has a 21% swinging strike percentage uh, to right-handed hitters this year. And 19% to lefties. So he can get those swings and misses. It's not like he's completely pitching to contact. I think that, you can get a 22, 23-point game out of him here.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I guess I guess I'm okay with that. I think he's a little bit expensive though. Um, not going to argue it though. Miami's just terrible. I mean, they really are. And look, we don't have a massive sample with only 3 weeks into the season, but they've struck out almost 1 full percent higher than the next worst team against righties this year. 29.1% collectively. It's been bad. Weighted on base average is sitting down there at 5th worst in the league. And this should come as no surprise to anyone, but their 121 ISO is 2nd worst behind or ahead of only the Tigers. So, I mean, Anibal Sanchez should be able to get himself a decent start here. And also, with a couple of these games being postponed or looking like they're going to be postponed, I have more interest now than I did earlier. Again, Lyles was on my list. Toussaint was on my list. Hell, even Kluber was $9K on DraftKings. There's plenty of interest at that price point. He's off the board as well. Jose Berrios off the board as well. A lot of really good options today, at least in my opinion, are no longer available. So that definitely will bring these guys more into play. What about hitters here? Caleb Smith is definitely good. There's no denying that. He also gets a very solid park. But do you have any interest in some of these right-handers for the Nats?
Yeah, for a couple of reasons. So I've already said, I'm playing a lot of Smith, but he's going to be popular. And so you get leverage there. And then everything I said about Boston just being a team with a ton of talent at low ownership applies to Washington as well. And the pitcher against them actually is going to have ownership, so it works as a leverage play too. If you just look at the hitters in this Washington lineup, and it's why I think it is a scary spot for Smith. Since the start of 2017, Ryan Zimmerman a 177 WRC plus, Rendon 166, Suzuki 157. Robles in 42 at bats at 145, but Juan Soto in the lefty-lefty matchup at 126, Brian Dozier 123. Those all against left-handed pitching, and not a lot of strikeouts here either. Everyone I just named is below 20%, except for Juan Soto at 22.5. So it's not an easy matchup. There is a lot that can go wrong. And while Smith does get a lot of swinging strikes, he, since last year, has a lot of 201 expected ISO to righties, and he does walk guys. So there's certainly the potential for him to just get in a lot of trouble in a hurry. And if that happens, you're passing 20% of the field with your unowned Washington stacks.
Right. I'm with you. Dave says, "Hey man, you think we should just avoid that first batch of games altogether if we can?" I mean, I'm assuming Dave's talking about the weather. I don't. Pittsburgh, San Francisco, yeah, but there's a few that I would say definitely not. Explain more what you mean by first batch of games. I know you got it pulled up there, but I can't take the time to look at it. So just write off which ones you're talking, or write down and send me which ones you're talking about, because there's a couple here that I think still have some really intriguing options, whether it be pitching or hitting. I'm assuming you're not on any Miami bats tonight.
No.
All right, let's talk Texas and Houston then. Verlander, Drew Smyly. Verlander's always going to be really popular. 32% projected ownership on Yahoo right now. The highest owned player, not just pitcher, highest owned player projected right now at 34% on DraftKings. And then on FanDuel, also the highest owned player. Or actually, no, let me change that. No, the highest owned pitcher at 21%. On DraftKings, let me make sure I don't have pitcher. I did. Still the highest owned. So basically the highest owned pitcher everywhere and the highest owned player, projected highest owned player on DraftKings right now, Adam. Meanwhile, Houston has the highest implied run total on the slate against Drew Smyly. But I need to point this out because I think this is one of the most important factors to talk about. The Texas Rangers bullpen this season. Even if Drew Smyly gets knocked out of this game early, the Rangers bullpen is has the second worst xFIP at 5.18. They have allowed the third most home runs, 1.82 per nine, and they have struck out the fewest batters per nine. It's not even close. The Tigers are 29th at 8.32 Ks per nine. Rangers are last at 7.41. When your bullpen's getting 7.5 strikeouts per nine, giving up that many home runs, granted, it's early. I get that. All I'm pointing out is that if Smiley gets knocked around, it's very possible that you're going to have some good matchups for these Houston bats out of the bullpen as well.
Yeah, it's a spot that, I know they're going to be popular, but it's still a 12-game slate at the moment, probably 11 by the time we start. But everything will be spread out enough that I'm not just going to fade the Astros for ownership. Their prices are too nice. The matchup is too good. Like, Smiley changed things up a little bit in his last start, started throwing his breaking ball more and stuff. And he hasn't been a terrible pitcher in the past. It wouldn't be surprising if at some point this season he kind of flips a switch and becomes, pretty decent. But so far, a 405 expected WOBA allowed, giving up a ton of power. Just a really good Astros lineup in general. And I like the specific one they're running out today with 9 righties, with Robinson Chirinos and Tyler White. Even Jake Marisnick has power batting 9. So it's just 8 righties. Michael Brantley, though, hits everyone, so it doesn't really matter. Just a really, really good lineup top to bottom. Alex Bregman's price tag, $4K on FanDuel, $46 on DraftKings, is just ridiculously cheap for the spot. Pulling up, they're free on Yahoo, basically, like 23 for Bregman, 22 for Altuve, $16 for Brantley, 19 for Correa, 10 for Tyler White. Basically everyone except Robinson Chirinos is free on Yahoo. So, relative to their skill sets, at least. So it's my number one stack. I think it's probably most people's number one stacks, but I don't really care.
Yeah. I mentioned in the deep dive today, you can get creative at pitcher pretty easily too, if you want. I mean, I don't have a whole lot of interest in fading this Houston team. And again, the bullpen being as bad as they have been for Texas just adds to the appeal. I really just like this lineup from top to bottom. And you pointed out some of the pricing as well. Springer's going to see 5 plate appearances. Altuve's been spectacular. He's got 3 homers against lefties already this season. Alex Bregman, Correa, Brantley too. I don't care. Tyler White's got a ton of power against lefties. And just from top to bottom, I really, really like this lineup.
And you mentioned you could get creative.
Sorry.
I'll say you mentioned you can get creative with pitching. You can get creative even within your stack here, and it's another reason I like it so much.
Right.
It's not a team where, like, if you're not stacking 1 through 5, you're stacking terrible hitters, but people will treat it that way because they always treat it that way.
For sure.
You're going to get lower owned guys at the bottom of what should be a very productive stack that have power. So you can be contrarian while stacking the clear number one stack on the slate.
I'm with you. Verlander.
Yeah, where I can get to them. There's a lot of expensive bats that I like on this slate, though. And as we've talked about, there are at the very least a lot of mid-range pitchers that have upside. So in cash, I would just get the Verlander. But in tournaments, I like that it's not like I'm relying on one mid-range pitcher to have a good game and to, give me a chance against Verlander. I can mix and match a bunch of these guys, and I think a couple of them probably do have good games. So I have Verlander. He's my 5th highest owned pitcher on DraftKings right now, but I have less of him at the moment than all those guys in the 8K range we talked about.
Okay. Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, I don't have any issues with Verlander. No reason to really ever have any issues with him. Just, always going to present some of the highest upside of any pitcher on a slate. But I also don't feel like you need to get there. Plus, this is still a Texas lineup that can do some damage. I mean, especially now that Cabrera has been hitting so well. Verlander still has the edge, but a lot of good power lefties in this lineup and a couple righties that don't really strike out much. So there are some strikeouts here. Don't get me wrong, but I also don't think it's crazy to think that the Rangers could put up some runs as well, or at least make Verlander's life a little bit more difficult. Anything else from this game, Adam?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Let's take it on to the next one then. We've got LA Dodgers and Milwaukee. Ross Stripling, Ulyss Chassin at Miller Park, which has just featured a ton of home runs already this season, a ton of scoring. What do you make of pitching here?
Not interested in either one. I think both of them are decent at preventing runs. I don't think either one gives me the kind of upside in their respective matchups tonight that I want. The one thing that really did just stand out to me from this game, and it came out during the show, is the lineup the Dodgers are running out there is absolutely the best lineup they could have here against Chacin, who he's lights out against righties. He's not awful against lefties, but he's clearly not as good. He doesn't get swings and misses, and with the power from the left side in this Dodgers lineup, letting the pitching the contact against them in Miller Park is a recipe for disaster. They have all five of their good lefties in there with Peterson, Muncy, Bellinger, Verdugo, and Seager all in the lineup. And the two righties that you have in the top seven are Justin Turner and AJ Pollock, who are both just really good. So I was already getting to the Dodgers as a stack, but I like them even more now after seeing their lineup.
Yep. So do I. We talk about this. This Dodgers lineup, depending on how it's constructed, can be really great for stack purposes. What about the Milwaukee bats?
Not as interested. I'm really surprised by the high total in this game. Milwaukee's come down a little bit since this morning, but it's still higher than I would expect. Ross Stripling doesn't give up a lot of power. A 118 expected ISO to lefties since last year, 157 to righties. I don't know. It kind of scares me how high it is because a lot of times when there's a total that doesn't make sense like that, it just comes through. But I don't have a reason for it. And the price tags on most of these guys aren't cheap either. You have an expensive Yelich, you have an expensive Yasmani Grandal. Mike Moustakas is affordably priced, but there's a lot of second basemen that I actually like today. So I'm not getting nearly as many Brewers as I am Dodgers right now.
Okay. Let me point out, though, that I know he has really struggled, but Travis Shaw is 2,600 on FanDuel. Look, I don't care how bad you've been. We still know that he has a ton of power. Miller Park, one of the best lefty power parks in the whole game. $12 on Yahoo, on DraftKings. Travis Shaw is also weighing in at 3,600. I still have no problems with a guy like Travis Shaw when he's that cheap. Just knowing how much pop he does actually have. Okay, St. Louis. Unless there's anything else you want to talk about on this one, Adam?
No.
All right. Let's talk about St. Louis and New York Mets. I was talking to you and Josh before the show started. I understand. By the way, on the mound for St. Louis is Adam Wainwright, Jason Vargas for New York Mets. I understand why the Cardinals aren't right now projected to get a ton of ownership, but I was also very much surprised by how low some of their projected ownership was. Now that we've done the update, it's come up a little bit, but it's still a lot lower than I would have expected. And the reason is Vargas is sitting on an 84-mile-per-hour fastball this season. 84 mile per hour. It's been ravaged over his first couple of appearances, and that shouldn't really surprise anybody. He does have a good changeup, of course, but I'm just not buying into it. It's another year where his velocity has dropped off even further. The changeup basically needs to be perfect for him to be able to navigate around good batters. And when I look at the amount of talent in this Cardinals lineup, I have Carpenter too. I don't care. Goldschmidt, Paul DeJong, expensive or not. Jose Martinez is basically minimum salary on FanDuel. Molina batting sixth is cheap. I just really like how this lineup shakes out against Vargas and basically going completely overlooked in a lot of spots. What do you think here?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't have faith in Vargas, being good. Like you said, he has to really be perfect with his location and, with his changeup. The one thing I guess working for him is that if you go back and look at how the right-handed hitters in the Cardinals lineup have done against left-handed changeups in the past, they haven't hit for a lot of power. They do have some swinging strikes, but that's not enough for me to get off the Cardinals here, especially with them projected for low ownership. It would be one thing if they were super popular and I wanted – I could use that as a reason to justify not being there, but that's not the case here. And I'll take my chances with hitters as good as, Paul DeJong and Goldschmidt, Ozuna. Martinez has all kinds of power. And then Matt Carpenter, he can hit lefties, and Jason Vargas is not particularly good against lefties. So it's just a really good lineup, at least 1 through 6, getting down to Yadi Molina. And I think there's a lot of upside here. So they're another one that I really like.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too, is it's not just like, oh, it's a good matchup, but these guys aren't very good. No, these are really good hitters. These are good hitters. And I'm more than willing to take the plunge here when it comes to these St. Louis bats. Any interest in pitching, and what are your thoughts on the Mets bats?
No interest in pitching. Adam Wainwright just doesn't do it for me as far as upside. He had one game against the Padres this year where he just had ridiculous strikeout stuff, but other than that, hasn't been getting swings and misses. And going back to last year, doesn't really get misses. I have kind of come down on the Mets throughout the day, just as other teams have kind of moved ahead of them for me. But I do think that there are some one-offs, particularly Robinson Cano at a cheap price point across the industry. I don't know why he's so cheap, but he has been, and he remains there. So I think that he's a good play. Conforto, Alonso, if you can get there, sure, but it's just really tough. They're both at positions that are deep and have a lot of guys that you like, and they're just more expensive. Like Conforto is basically the same price as Aaron Judge, just off the top of my head, same price as Mookie Betts. It's kind of tough to prioritize the Mets.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is, and you might have had a couple postponed games, but also a lot of really good offensive spots as well. Some teams I still really, really like. St. Louis is one of them, and I guess the fact that they're pricey in some spots means that there'll be lesser owned. Like even on Yahoo, Paul DeJong is $24. He's the second most expensive shortstop behind only Trevor Story. Goldschmidt 22, which I actually don't think is all that bad, given that Pete Alonso is 26. And then Jose Martinez is 15. So, a few of these guys are definitely going to price you up, but it doesn't bother me just because I wouldn't be surprised if they scored 10 runs today.
Yep, that's how I feel about the Dodgers on DraftKings, where you have Peterson at 5K and you have Bellinger at 5,600. People are going to play Verlander, and it's going to take away their Dodgers exposure, so they should be low.
Absolutely. I think with both of these teams, that's going to happen a lot.
And also, just not briefly going back, the Dodgers are outside of Bellinger at $27. They are really cheap on Yahoo.
Yes, they are. Yep, absolutely. And Verlander's projected to be very popular there as well. All right. Anything else on the Mets in St. Louis?
Nope.
All right. Well, then we keep going to Coors Field. Henderman Marquez, Vince Velasquez. Man, I love this guy. I absolutely love him. So do you. Talking about Marquez. One hitter last time out. A one hitter, Adam. 9 Ks. Just ridiculous performance against San Francisco. He's phenomenal. That doesn't mean that we can't target some Philly bats today. Roman Quinn in the lineup, super cheap. A few other guys, we'll talk about it. But I really, really like. Well, you know what? I was going to get to hitter. Let's first talk about Herman Marquez. What are your thoughts on him today? How are you approaching him at Coors Field? We know that ever since he added that slider or started throwing it more and it was better with better results, he's been that much better at Coors Field at home, not having to rely on his curveball, which is very good, just not as effective in the altitude.
Yeah, and he still throws it. He just doesn't throw it quite as much. Right. And yeah, if you go back to last season and look at his game logs of his pitch types, he basically started throwing the slider a ton the beginning of August. Since then, in Coors Field, he has a 35% strikeout percentage. He's allowed like a sub 300 WOBA, which is even more impressive, obviously, in Coors. So I'm torn on what to do with him because I don't like taking guys against Philly. I have a lot of respect for their hitters, but at the same time, I've said that I like Anibal Sanchez, I like Rodon, I like Caleb Smith at the same price point. Herman Marquez is just better than all of those guys. He's, in my opinion, the second most talented pitcher on the slate, and he's $2,000 less expensive than the most talented pitcher on the slate. So in tournaments, especially, I don't have our updated ownership in front of me, but I assume that he's going to come in at low ownership. I like getting ahead of the field there and just taking talent and hoping that it wins out.
He's just so good is the thing.
Right.
I mean, he really is. He's just so good. And I just 100% believe in his stuff. I don't really think there's any reason not to. So
yeah, I mean, he throws almost 100 miles an hour with a nasty slider, and by the way, he has a pretty good curveball too. Exactly.
Now, granted, this isn't to say that Philly isn't capable of producing some runs at Coors Field tonight, but Marquez is really good. Velasquez, on the other hand, man, he's really a two-pitch guy, and he relies on a curveball. I love David Dahl. I love Blackman's been brutal, but I like him too. McMahon re-enters the lineup with 2 homers and 5 RBIs. I mean, this Rockies lineup while I love St. Louis, while I love Houston, I really like the Rockies today too.
Yep, they're my second favorite stack. I don't think that's going out on a limb or anything, but this lineup's just so much deeper with McMahon and Dahl back in the lineup. Now suddenly Ian Desmond, who was kind of a liability in your stacks, he's like a cheap high upside guy hitting sixth now that you can use to fit in the other more expensive bats. Blackman, like you said, just been absolutely lost at the plate, but we have such a long track record of Blackman that I'm not overly concerned about that, especially with the platoon advantage against Velasquez here.
Right.
Dahl and McMahon are still reasonably priced too. Even Blackman, Story, and Arenado, they're expensive, but they're not at their like $5,800 price point that we normally get like midsummer.
And McMahon is cheap.
Yeah, and multi-position eligible on DraftKings too. So it's I love the Rockies here.
Yeah, me too. I guess that's really all we need to talk about here. Who are your favorite Rocky bet? For me, McMahon, just based on price tag, is up there for sure. But Dahl and Blackman, of course, and then I don't. It's hard to have a preference. I mean, all of them, the 1 through 5. If you want to play Desmond or Hampson, fine. But the 1 through 5 is beautiful here.
Yeah, I mean Dahl's my favorite because I think his price is really nice. Also, then McMahon, and then I guess like Arenado, Blackman, Story.
Yeah, Blackman's got to wake up eventually.
Yeah,
and it can't last forever.
So right now, actually, just looking at my initial crunch, Story was my highest owned Rocky, and that's just because of his position, I'm sure. And then like Blackman, Arenado, Dahl all together, and Ryan McMahon is lower. Like I guess just because first base and second base are both pretty deep. But yeah, I obviously like all 5 guys a lot.
All right. Well, I guess we'll keep moving unless there's anything else in this game you want to talk about.
Yeah. So where are you? Do you want to roster Marquez? Because I'm still kind of torn on exactly what I'm doing.
It's really difficult. I did write him up in the deep dive today. He's only made 1 start at Coors this year, and it was a tough one. But I'm not really worried about that. I think we'd be foolish to overlook the fact that he's been spectacular this season. Yeah, he faced Miami and San Francisco, but also shut down the Rays. His strikeout upside is through the roof. It's not outrageous to think that Marquez comes out and throws another gem. So, no, I do like Marquez.
Yeah, and so while you were talking, I was pulling up our updated ownership, and we still have him at 9%. And then on top of that, we have Bryce Harper as the 5th highest owned hitter on the slate. Roman Quinn is up there. The Phillies are going to have ownership, so I'm going to end up just being overweight in tournaments and hoping for the best. I'll be underweight probably on Philly bats, and that's a stand that I'm willing to take. If they score 10 runs on Marquez, tomorrow's another day.
That's right. That's right. And I'm sure you'll have some Philly stacks as well. So maybe not, but it it doesn't hurt. And Roman Quinn had the golden sombrero yesterday. 4 plate appearances, 4 strikeouts. Heck of a job, fella. But he's still dirt cheap. I mean, he's really inexpensive for a Coors game, and he's built in the sense as a player to excel at a park like this. So he is really cheap. Toronto, Oakland, Marcus Stroman, and Aaron Brooks. This is a game that I really could forget was on the slate, but maybe you have something here that you like a lot more than I do.
I'm hoping that I'm winning all the money before the late games start, because I think I'm going to be forgetting that a lot of these games are on the slate. Yeah, I mean, Toronto's offense sucks. Aaron Brooks isn't awful. He's not great. If I wanted to target against him, it would be with lefty power. So like Justin Smoke would be the number 1 hitter from Toronto for me. On the other side, Stroman is really good at getting outs. If he ends up in some lineups, I don't hate it. Like I prefer him to Adam Wainwright. I actually prefer him by a little bit to DeSclafani, who I think will be more popular. Stroman has been throwing. He does throw a slider a lot. He has a good one. He can get swings and misses when he wants to. He's just also happy to let you put the ball in play and make outs. So it's not the most enticing DFS pitcher, but I'm not looking to really take bats against him either. So like I guess my highest owned stuff from this game is probably Smoke and Stroman, but it's not in any sort of abundance.
Yeah, I mean, very tough to get any volume from this. I don't know. Not a good park. I'm not going to repeat what you said about Stroman, but he is a good pitcher, especially when he's healthy, and I believe he's healthy. I'm very much okay with not having much at all from this one. What about the Angels and Seattle? Marco Gonzalez, Felix Pena. I actually talked about Gonzalez in today's deep dive, and he's not a pitcher he's not the type of pitcher that I generally have much interest in, but this is a lineup for the Angels that outside of Mike Trout, man. I mean, where does the power come from against the lefties? Marco Gonzalez, if he went complete game shutout today with 3 or 4 strikeouts, I honestly wouldn't be surprised. Actually faced this Angels team earlier in April, went 8 1/3, allowed 1 run, struck out 3, and only threw 100 pitches. I mean, it's just so hard. There's 2 sides to this. On one side, Marco Gonzalez, very good at getting called strikes, isn't going to miss a lot of bats. On the other side, he'll get on the other side, he'll get a lot of ground balls, a lot of weak contact, and faces a lineup that is just wholly unimposing against lefties with very little power. I don't know, man. I think Marco Gonzalez could have a very good game today. It's just, does he have the upside?
That's where I'm at too. I'm not interested in paying the price tag for him, but I am not really looking to target against him outside of the fact that the Angels are really cheap and they do somehow once again have a 5 implied run total in
That
LA.
made no sense to me. That made no sense to me at all.
I don't, and it's going up. It was like 4.6.
It was 4.8 earlier.
Right. And every time I've looked at it, I've said, this makes no sense. And then I look again and it's gone up. So
I know.
I mean, I'm not going to talk you off getting to the Angels because in general, from a process standpoint, if you roster cheap hitters on a team with a 5 implied run total all season, you probably come out ahead. And I'm not going to act like I am like better at predicting it than, models and stuff. So,
but it did seem strange. I mean,
yeah, it makes no sense to me. Yeah, it makes no sense. That and the Brewers total, both of them just do not make sense.
What was the Brewers at?
Like 4.8 or 4.9. Like it's tripling. But they're at least a really good offense, so you can just give them credit.
And a very good park.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, here it's a bad park, a bad offense, a decent pitcher. So yeah, I can see getting to the Angels just because they're really cheap. It will give you access to like Verlander plus good one-offs or something like that. Mike Trout obviously is not included in that tangent about the Angels sucking. Getting the Mike Trout here is really good. Andrelton Simmons is a cheap shortstop option, but outside of that, and outside of like full stacks, what am I doing with Albert Pujols or Jonathan Lucroy or David Fletcher? They don't give me enough upside.
I'm with you. Yeah, Moses Guthrie says Mike Trout has 6 consecutive quote unquote weak games. Is that a reason to play him? Honestly, the reason to play Mike Trout is because he's the best player there is, and don't expect those to continue from Mike Trout. And a lot of times, a lot of the reasons he'll have these underwhelming games is because he'll walk 3 times.
Yep.
You actually do run that risk a lot with guys like him and Bryce Harper, and a lot of these they will walk a lot, and that will suck sometimes if they're not getting pitched to.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, completely agree, and that's why I do just in general prefer Trout in cash games because 1, his ownership doesn't matter, and 2, him getting a bit on base every at bat is a good thing pretty much no matter what. Whereas tournaments, like you're still just trying to find guys that'll go and hit 2 home runs, and if the other team just decides they would rather pitch to Andrelton Simmons than Mike Trout, there's nothing you can do about it.
Exactly, and I think Marco Gonzalez is good, but comparatively speaking, Mike Trout or Marco Gonzalez, who has the advantage?
Yeah,
I'll go with my boy Trout all day long. Anything? Do you want to talk about anything else from this game? I think we pretty much covered it, unless you have some interest in Seattle bats against Felix Pena.
Yeah, I mean, we're waiting on the Seattle lineup, and I think that makes a big difference because Pena can get some swings and misses against righties. It is a good park. He doesn't give up a lot of power to righties. I'd have some interest there if it's a right-handed heavy lineup, but against lefties, he does give up more power, gets a little bit less in the way of swings and misses. I think Jay Bruce could do some damage. So I am kind of interested just to see how that lineup looks because I don't think 6,400 for Pena at SP2 is a terrible idea.
Okay. That makes sense. I don't know if it's necessary either.
Right.
But
I agree with that too.
Yeah, but not a terrible pitcher. Let's close it out here with Cincinnati, San Diego. Hey, before we do, the 15K guaranteed on Yahoo. No special names, no cute names for Easter, no Easter egg hunt nonsense that you see all over the place, the bunny hop, all this wild stuff. Just the MLB 15K guaranteed 2K to first. That's all it is. And that's really all you need to know. Still a bunch of entries open. 748 out of 1137. $15 to enter. 10 max entry as well. And when you look at the management fees here, they're either lower than most or not there at all. And what do you think when you're looking at these 10 max, Adam, on big slates like this? 14 games. I think we have 12 now because of the postponements. Do you think it's more of an advantage, less of an advantage to a better, smarter player, or do you not really see it making much of a difference compared to a smaller slate?
I mean, I think I think in general it's more of an advantage just because of not having to play against people with 150 entries. On the bigger slate, it's nice because you like on a 14 game slate, there's going to be teams that just score an insane amount of runs. And most of the time, it's going to be some random team that you weren't going to get to. If everyone's only making 10 lineups, there's a better chance that it is irrelevant than, if 100 people have 150 lineups. You basically have to have the nuts, and it's so much harder on the big slate. So I still think that it gives you an advantage if you're, smart and know what you're doing.
We'll post it in the YouTube chat as well. Link, you can sign up for Yahoo if you've yet to play there. Keep your eyes on the lookout in the YouTube chat. All right, Adam, let's get to our last game. San Diego, Cincinnati, Matt Strahm, Anthony DeSclafani. Actually, Anthony DeSclafani was another guy that I talked about in today's article, and I was kind of surprised by it, but just a quick note to make here, and I'll toss it over to you. First of all, he's sitting, just shy of 95 miles per hour on his fastball. But one thing that has stood out to me is he's throwing the curveball a lot. And last year he threw the curveball 66 times across 115 innings. This year he's thrown it already 39 times in 13 innings. And the reason I think it's interesting is because he's got a 21% whiff rate on the pitch and 60% ground balls, and batters aren't hitting it at all. So lefties have always given him a lot of trouble. If this curveball is going to be deployed as much as it is with as good results as he's gotten, you might actually see DeSclafani better now against opposite-handed hitters. Now, what's interesting too is that he's never been terrible against righties. Wasn't terrible against them last year. My expectation is he faces a lot of righties tonight. What do you think here about DeSclafani, who has actually shown some signs of life from a strikeout standpoint?
Yeah, I think it's a good spot, or a good enough spot. There are some strikeouts in the San Diego lineup, but more importantly, there's a lot of right-handed hitters. And since the start of last season, 266 expected WOBA, 129 expected ISO to righties, with almost a 12% swinging strike rate. Also has a slider that is his most featured pitch to righties that gets swings and misses. So I do think that, I don't feel super confident in it just because it's DeSclafani, and he's someone that I've always believed in his talent, but he's never really put it together. So I don't feel super confident in it, but I will be getting there where I can't afford the 8K guys.
All right. Yeah, I really don't think it's a crazy play. I had no interest earlier in the day, and then when I started looking into him more, I actually began to realize that DeSclafani has the curveball really looks good, and if that pitch can hold up, if it's for real, he also has a slider that's decent enough. I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a decent season, but something to at least keep your eyes open for. What about the other side here? Matt Strahm got a lot of hype, of course, and has had two really solid starts with no real strikeouts. And then his first start, he got blown up facing Cincinnati today. What do you make of him?
More interested actually in some of the cheap bats on Cincinnati. Strahm is fine. I don't think he's bad or anything, but he's Yeah, like I don't think he's bad, but I just have so many pitchers on the slate that I like, including Desclafani on the other side. I'd rather get to, but you have some really nice price points with right-handed power here. Eugenio Suarez at 4K on DraftKings is a really good hitter with a lot of power. That's probably too cheap of a price tag for him. He's 18 on Yahoo. I think that there are better plays there, but the DraftKings price stood out. Matt Kemp, 3,500 on DraftKings, $7 on Yahoo. One of my favorite value plays on the slate. Tons of power here. Strom so far this year, a 195 expected ISO to righties, only a 10.9% swinging strike percentage, which isn't great. So I really, really like the price tag on him. Puig is okay, but Kemp and Suarez in particular, I like.
All right. Yeah. I mean, Puig batting third, I don't mind either. Suarez, you just talked about. I think Suarez is in a great spot. And another thing about him is, and most of the bats from this team, they are not very expensive. I mean, a bunch of these guys are really coming at a good price, and that to me is nice. I wish Jose Peraza wasn't batting ninth, but he is, and that definitely hurts. What about Kirk Casale batting fifth against the lefty?
Sure. Like, I mean, he's not like my top catching option or anything.
I only ask because catchers generally always terrible. So, like, basically, where does he compare to your other catchers?
Let me see. I know I have I like Chirinos more than him. If I can get to Real Muto, then obviously that's good. No Zanino in the lineup hurts as far as the position goes. But so I have more Chirinos, Real Muto, Suzuki, Molina, and then I get to Casale.
All right. Good point just brought up, by the way, in chat. Casale's $8 on Yahoo, so that's pretty solid. He said, "I'll keep that in chat. We'll talk about that later." By the way, if you do happen to sign up on Awesemo, you want to check out the premium content, make sure to get into our Slack chat, the premium Slack chat. We have a lot of fun in there and talking daily fantasy sports around the clock and some other stuff, premium sports betting channel and so much other stuff, premium office hours as well, where our hosts and our guys that put in work at Awesemo will sit around and talk strategy and ideas with our subscribers throughout the day. All right, Adam, that'll do it. Let's go over our top stacks before we head out. By the way, I've been keeping an eye on weather. I don't see any new postponements yet. Just trying to see if PNC Park had any movement here. That's the one. Go ahead.
They're in a delay now.
They're already in a delay. Yeah, I saw that the tarp was already on. I guess that's it. So, all right, let's do top stacks.
Houston, Colorado, Yankees, St. Louis, Washington for me.
All right, yeah. Houston and St. Louis for sure. Following that, give me Colorado. Those are my top three by a pretty wide margin. And then get the Dodgers in there. That's postponed. Cincinnati as well. Yeah, I think Cincinnati definitely an interest. Did you mention them as well?
Just that they're not in my top five, but
yeah,
just that they're cheap.
They're probably around 6 or so. But Houston, St. Louis, Colorado, two of them going to be popular. One of them surprisingly unpopular would be my favorites here. Adam, anything else before we head out and turn it over to the Live Before Lock crew?
Nope.
It's crazy how much faster these MLB shows go.
Yeah.
Granted, we scheduled this at 4:45 when we still had 14 games too, so it would have been perfect.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
But what are you going to do? Anyway, thanks as always for tuning in. Keep an eye out for weather. Our guys coming up next will definitely let you know exactly what's going on as far as weather goes. But that's a big thing to watch right now as we lead up to lock. Hit us with a thumbs up too if you enjoy the show. You want to see more. Like the video. It helps us a lot, and we greatly appreciate it. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always know when new content's dropping next. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck tonight. And, hey, have a great weekend. I'll be on Sirius XM Awesemo Radio tomorrow from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Not on Easter Sunday, but check it out. Sirius 210 XM 87 Fantasy Sports Radio. And, hey, have a great holiday for those of you that celebrate. We'll see you back here after the weekend on the Deeper Dive.